I don't like the war.
You've worked directly with President Trump.
That if you read their constitution, the first couple of sentences is they want to foment and they want to project the Iranian radical Islamic cult. I'm also observing 25 years of history of the Americans in the Middle East trying to create regime change with no success. We replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. The president says that the country pays the tariff. That's not who pays the tariff. American people pay the tariff. Now, hopefully, I'm wrong. Hopefully, tonight we'll wake up and it's a V-shaped bounce. Well, when you're 15, 16, 17 and you're reading the paper about current events and it's the president of this country, the prime minister of that country, you're thinking that they put their pants on differently than you. You're thinking they're special, and because of what your financial means are and where you're living, you think you're not. One of the big realizations for me in my life is that your opportunity comes a lot from, frankly, your upbringing, a lot from your brain chemistry, and a lot from your belief system. You could play with anybody. Fight is on the inside. Remember, Henry Ford once said something, Bonnie, you should listen very carefully. If you think you can, or you think you can't, you're right.
Got the whole crypto world going wild. Money blockchain, she's the queen of the game. Stacking crypto like it's her claim to fame. If you want success, then take a look away.
My guest today, Anthony Scaramucci, he's one of my favorite, founder of Skybridge Capital, chairman of SALT. He also served as the White House communications director during Trump's first term. And here's his bestseller, The Little Book of Bitcoin, has just been translated into Chinese. What a fantastic book. Hello, Anthony.
Well, first of all, thank you. And I want to stay your favorite, okay? So I got to get out of this interview with you still liking me, Bonnie, right? That's my goal.
Okay. Well, first question. I have to ask you about the war.
No, listen, I don't like the war. I wouldn't have done the war. I don't recommend the war. The war always leads to a doctrine of unintended consequences. And if you even just think about what is the best outcome for the United States or for the Gulf countries, it's still a very murky outcome. So, you're better off not having wars, frankly. That's just my personal opinion. We're in it now. I don't see a 93 million person country with a 5,000 year history just giving up right away. I just don't see that happening. And, we don't do regime change well in the United States. So we have a very bad track record. We replaced the Taliban with the Taliban after 20 years of fighting. And so for me, I don't like it. And I wish they didn't do it. But we're in it now. I'm an American. I wish our troops great safety and success. But I can't believe, and I go to the Gulf a lot, as you probably know. I'm in Abu Dhabi all the time, Dubai, Bahrain, I'm in Qatar. I can't believe that the Gulf states are happy about this. I just can't believe that they would be, because it's hurting the real estate prices, it's hurting everything. Now,
are they happy about it?
I don't think that they are, no. I don't think they are. So people are saying that the Gulf states wanted this. I don't think so. That open letter from the Dubai billionaire, I don't know him well. I've met him once. I don't think MBZ would have ever let that letter go out if, he didn't sanction the letter. So I don't think they're happy about it. Look, it is what it is. We'll see what happens. What's interesting, though, is as you've seen, Bitcoin has a bid. Bitcoin hasn't really gone through its, say, intra-cycle low of 60,000. And looking at it today, the price is relatively firm given everything that we know about oil prices and other assets. So I feel like Bitcoin is this sneaky instrument, Bonnie. It led us into this thing. When everything seemed superficially okay, Bitcoin crashed 40%. And now that everything is not okay and it's more than just superficial, Bitcoin seems to be fairly stable.
15% of Iranians support this current regime, very low. So many people want this change, but they're probably scared. There's this speech that Trump said, the hour of freedom is at your hand. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny.
I say tonight that the hour of your freedom is at hand. Now is the time to seize control of your destiny and to unleash the prosperous and glorious future.
But what do you think would happen realistically?
Well, you have to understand something, that there's 47 years of suppression. I can't imagine after 4 years of war in Russia that the Russian population is super supportive of that war, but you have a police state and you have a security system around the country that's repressing the people. So I accept that, but I say those people are generally unarmed. Those people can go into a protest in the street. By anybody's count, you have to tell me there's a lot of disinformation. The Iranians say 3,000 people were killed during the January protests. The Americans are saying it's 30,000. I'm not sure which number is correct, but that's 3,000 or 30,000 too many. So you have to be very realistic about these things. I want there to be peace. I recognize the repression of the regime. I'm not sitting here as an apologist for Iran. Of course, it's a repressive regime, and it's something that I would like to have end. It's been 47 years of heartbreak for the Americans in the West as it relates to that country. I will also point out to people listening to your show that if you read their constitution, the first couple of sentences is they want to foment and they want to project the Iranian radical Islamic cult, if you will, or however you want to describe it, the Islamic Republic of Iran. They want to export it to other places. They've been a state sponsor of terrorism. They have Iranian militias in Iraq that have wreaked havoc. Obviously, they have funded Hamas and Hezbollah with their oil proceeds, which has put a hurt on Israel, which is one of our strongest allies. So I'm a very realistic person about who they are and what they are, but I'm also observing 25 years of history of the Americans in the Middle East trying to create regime change with no success. And so we probably spent $8 to $10 trillion. Millions of people have died, tens of thousands of Americans wounded and or killed. And so it's hard for me to understand after that experience over the last 25 years why we're going in this direction. I'm just saying to you as a rationalist and a pragmatist, there were other ways to go about this. I think we're going to find, frankly, that in the situation in Oman, there was a deal on the table, and we're going to have to understand more carefully why that deal wasn't accepted. I mean, even taking uranium enrichment down to near zero for the country. There was a negotiation about 3 weeks ago in Oman where the Americans were there with the Iranians, and then the talks apparently broke down. But the Iranians agreed to the terms that the Americans wanted. Okay, so the question is, why did we not take those terms? We said, okay, here's the terms, and the Iranians said, okay, we're going to give you those terms, and then we didn't take them. So listen, I'm not a pacifist either. I get the fact that sometimes you have to use the military and you have to protect our interests around the world. I understand all of that, but I just think this is a really bad situation. And when you're learning that the Russians are providing signal intelligence to help target Iranian missiles, and the president is, I guess, okay with that, and the president's going to help, I guess, Vladimir Putin in Ukraine. I don't know. It doesn't add up to me, So, but again, I'm an American. I want to support our troops, and I obviously am praying for a great outcome. But as it relates to Bitcoin, I think other assets are going to fall a lot. I think Bitcoin has already had its crash. I think we've hit our interest cycle low. That's just me personally. I think it's that $60,000 number. It feels pretty sturdy here in the mid 60s, and everybody's got different opinions of Bitcoin. I'm more in the 4-year cycle of Bitcoin, and I really feel like you won't see Bitcoin rallying until the end of this year. It'll probably be starting in the fourth quarter. Just because of the way the economics are around the mining, the hash rate, the halving cycle coming. We're 2 years into the last halving. As you get towards the third year, you'll start to see more robust activity in Bitcoin. So even though we have institutions in there and all this other stuff, I still see the traditional 4-year cycle for the asset.
加密货币的借贷平台龙头 Nexo 现在有一个加成的活动，用下面的连结开户的15天之内呢，存入至少5000美元的资产，就可以参与他们加码 2% 的回馈机制。也就是接下来30天，他们会用你这个账户里面的平均资产规模去计算 2% 的奖励，奖励的上限对应的是25万美金的资产。如果是现在的新用户注册呢，就可以拿到 7% 的 USDT 加上 2% 的平台币加成。再有假设我想要再提高收益，第一个提高收益的方法就是选择定期锁仓，也就是锁仓3个月，那年化可以多 2%， 也就是最基本的这个 7%， 再加上锁仓的3个月多拿 2%， 再加上新用户活动多 2%。 第二个提高收益的方法呢，就是选择用 Nexo 的平台币拿所有的奖励，那就是比这个 USDT 多给 2%。 第三个提高收益的方法呢，就是提高你在 Nexo 里面的会员等级啦，也就是在投资组合里面增加这个 Nexo Token Nexo 平台币的数量。不只是稳定币啊，其他的币也可以质押。仪表板的最高收益资产这边点进去，你就可以看到各种不同的币种它的年化收益率，还有不同的会员等级可以得到不同的这个收益率。如果本来币圈就有一点闲置资产，这可能是一种可以参考的配置方法。
About other assets, for example, last year, Liberation Day, it was a V-shaped recovery. Are we going to see that now in case the market crash a little more?
Well, I mean, again, you have to tell me what's going to happen. If you tell me the Americans say, okay, Trump is prone to do anything. He can say we've won, whether we've won or we haven't, and he pulls back our offensive operation. Will that stop the Iranians from bombing our Gulf allies? Presumably it would, and maybe that would cause a V shape. But I think a lot of damage has been done because you've taken out a few of our satellite imagery radar systems. That's factual. Both the Americans and the Iranians are saying that. The Gulf states have felt generally unprotected. We put bases in a lot of those areas, and they have felt generally unprotected. I think you've upset the apple cart. I think you've upset the balance of what's going on in the Middle East. So even if you get, I don't know what's the outcome. The Trump administration stands down or something like that. You tell me. I mean, I don't see how you get to a regime change without boots on the ground. Moreover, put the boots on the ground. Look at what happened in Iraq. You had 10 years of resistance, 10 years of ISIS. Look, it's not clear to me that that's going to be the answer. So I'm sitting here looking at various outcomes. The American outcomes are very different from the Israeli outcomes. The Israelis, Trump was looking to negotiate with somebody. He was looking for a Delcy Rodriguez. Delcy, of course, is now the president of Venezuela. She was the number 2 for Maduro. Trump basically went to her and tried to cut a deal. So he was looking to do that, but the Israelis killed 40 or 50 people, some of which were secularists. So, we have diverging interests with the Israelis. And again, try to understand the Israelis. They've been terrorized by Iran for 40 plus years. This attack on October 7th obviously really hurt the country, hit the country. The situation in Gaza is an unspeakable tragedy, and whatever side of it you're on, I think we can stipulate that it's a tragedy on both sides. So to me, I don't see the way out of this cleanly. Now, hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully tonight we'll wake up and it's a V-shaped bounce like the Liberation Day. But again, you talk about a Liberation Day, April 2nd. It was an unforced error by the United States. There was no reason to do that. Moreover, the Supreme Court ruled that what the president was doing was illegal. So he did something illegal. We all looked at it and said, okay, you can't do that. Did it anyway. We took in the tariff revenues, which is an illegal tax. I just want to point out to everybody, when the president says that the country pays the tariff, that's not who pays the tariff. American people pay the tariff. And so this sort of stuff is, to me, poor management. When you have good executive management, really good things happen. I was in Belfast last week. I had a live show with Alistair Campbell, the former aide to Tony Blair. We had 2,000 people at the convention center in Belfast, and we were just talking about good policy, good governmental policy, better quality of life. There are 30 years now since they signed this treaty, or 28 years since they signed this treaty in Northern Ireland, and there's a whole group of people growing up in Northern Ireland in peace. They don't have the trauma of their ancestors of the constant bombing and the constant fighting. So good policy, you get good outcomes, you get peace and prosperity. Bad policy, where nobody can tell you what the end game is and nobody can suggest to you which way it's going to go, that's dismaying, to say the least,
I think a lot of people are wondering, you've worked directly with President Trump. Is this the end of, America leading the global stability? Or what is happening with Venezuela, with Iran?
I'm a realist. What the Americans are doing is outside of the ambit of the 80 years of the rules-based order that they tried to create. And so now we're acting unilaterally, and frankly, we're letting one person run things, okay? So we have more or less revoked the War Powers Act. If you read the War Powers Act, you have to have an imminent danger. The president he is the commander-in-chief. There's an imminent danger to the United States. You don't have to go through the Congress. You have to give the guy some flexibility to act. Was Iran an imminent danger to the United States? Our intelligence officials, when they briefed the Senate Intelligence Committee, said no, it wasn't. So you're stretching all of the rules even inside the United States, and you're stretching the Constitution for this one man. So the reason why I have been critical, we have done better. And the beauty of the blockchain is in its decentralization. The beauty of the American government, frankly, is in its decentralization. The fact that there wasn't centralized power in the United States to speak of, where each branch of government had separate but equal authority, it really allowed the country to flourish. You weren't going to get one hegemon, you weren't going to get one autocrat to stiff the American people. And when you study autocracies, what typically happens is the people at the very top, there's a funnel of corruption, and the people that are close to the leader, they do very, very well. And the rest of the people feel general unfairness about the situation, and then they go from having aspirations to feeling economically desperate. So to me, what he's doing is against the we're almost 250 years old. It's against that. But we don't have a Congress that's willing to fight and stand up to him. There's nobody standing up to him. So, I mean, and the guy, by the way, we're moving through the news cycles very quickly, Bonnie. So a couple of weeks ago, maybe 8 weeks ago, we were talking about the invasion of Greenland. And so the notion that we were going to invade a NATO-based country and take over their land, we had to, some of the people in the Congress did go to him privately and said, okay, well, we'll probably have to figure out a way to get you out of office if you want to continue talking like that and speaking like that. So now we're back. Now we're in Iran. So the president likes attention, likes making money for himself. He's made over $4 billion for himself and his family in the last year. It's just we're going against every norm that's worked. There's an irony here, and I'm going to say it to you in a way that makes me sad, but there's an irony here. Everything that's worked to make America prosperous and to help people like me who grew up with no money and were able to live the American dream, we're doing in reverse now.
You just mentioned about, growing up and all that. Last time we did the show, it was with David Lin. And first of all, before I ask you that question, I really want to thank you, because when we first met in New York with David Lin, it was my first ever conference. And I told you.
That was at the DAS? Where was that? At the DAS?
Exactly. You told me, I don't know if you remember this, I gotcha. And, the rest is history. I've been doing this ever since. So thank you so much. That really made a really big impact.
Well, look, you got to listen to me. Everything in life is about the fight is on the inside. I remember Henry Ford once said something, Bonnie, you should listen very carefully. If you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Okay? Think about that, okay? The fight's on the inside. Okay, you got it. You're talented. You're extremely good at what you're doing, and you have great capabilities. You have to believe that. Once you believe that, you're capable of doing anything. It's an inside game, Bonnie. Don't forget that about life.
I have talked about this in multiple podcasts, and I love you for that. Thank you. And from last conversation as well, I asked you about growing up in a blue collar family and becoming very successful, and you said if you could go back and tell your younger self, you would tell him to be way more sure of himself. Is
Yeah,
there any
take more-
like personal story you could share?
Well, I mean, listen, like you and many other people, I was intimidated and felt insecure about my role in the world. And so, as an example, when you're 15, 16, 17 and you're reading the paper about current events and it's the president of this country, the prime minister of that country, you're thinking that they put their pants on differently than you. You know, you're thinking they're special, and because of what your financial means are and where you're living, you think you're not. But as I said to one of my buddies at Harvard Law School, who was talking very pedantically to me, I said, let me tell you something, buddy. There are people putting sheetrock in my neighborhood. They're installing sheetrock that are way smarter than you. Okay, so calm yourself down. They just had parents that were putting in sheetrock, and they didn't have your opportunity. So calm down. So I think one of the big realizations for me in my life is that your opportunity comes a lot from, frankly, your upbringing, a lot from your brain chemistry, and a lot from your belief system. So I can sit here today at 62 and tell you that, you know, you can play with anybody. Okay, they give you the ball, you'll put the ball in the hoop. Okay, so don't let anybody intimidate you. Don't let anybody think that they're better than you. Now, the flip side of that is because I grew up in a blue-collar neighborhood, I don't think I'm better than anybody. You know, so if I'm in a hotel, my grandmother was once a maid, I often think, hey, this person cleaning this room could be somebody's grandmother. So I want to make sure I leave them a gratuity and treat them with kindness and dignity. So you're no better than anybody, Bonnie, but you're no worse than anybody. I think that's the big messaging from my life, and that's basically my realization, you know.
I love that. Before I let you go, your son AJ bought a Pokemon card for $16 million.
Yeah, 16.5 million, yeah.
What crossed your mind after learning that?
Well, listen, I'm proud. He's an avid collector. He's a serial entrepreneur. He's a venture capitalist. He went to Stanford Business School. He's been a Pokemon collector his whole life. I think he sees that as a one of one, and I think he sees that as a unique asset. And remember, these avid Pokemon collectors are in their 30s. Imagine these guys when they're in their 60s, and I think the possibilities are endless. But he's also building a treasure company. He calls it Treasure Trove. And so, you know, I'm very, very proud of him, and I wish him great success with it. He wants, you know, he's telling people he wants to buy a T-Rex. He wants to buy a Declaration of Independence. And so, you know, before you know it, he'll probably have a lot of assets on his balance sheet that I think are irreplaceable. So, yeah, I mean, listen, that was a big purchase, but he also, we're talking about it, you and I, a lot of people talk about it. He captured the internet with it, and he's arrived, and so I'm very proud of him.
For everyone watching, I'll put the link of 比特币从头学, the little book of Bitcoin, down below. Get a copy. It is super easy to read and one of the best way to understand Bitcoin if you're just starting. We're also giving away a few copies of this book, so tell us in the comment section what you love most about this conversation and share it with your family and friends. Then you'll have a chance to win this book. Thank you again, Anthony.